And I think that, again, I think that lines up great with our next clip here. So in this clip, she is going to be talking about Jews' view of forever or eternal. And the summation is that they didn't have one. And so how could there be an eternal torment if there was no view of that? So let's go ahead and listen to this short clip.
No, that's another thing. If you look in Young's literal translation or any other literal Bibles, you will never find the word forever, because the Jews didn't speak about forever. They were only concerned about the here and now. And
when we say forever, we're not talking about eternal either. Eternal's
right. No eternal, no forever. They used a word in the Hebrew, olam, which meant beyond the horizon, like that we can't see. And they weren't concerned with the afterlife. They were concerned with the here and now and how we treat our neighbor.
So again, I'm not sure, you're the expert here because you have looked into this more. Is that the case for ancient Judaism, that they didn't have a concept of forever because they were primarily concerned with the here and now?
Well, number one, notice she didn't say they were primarily concerned with the here and now. She says they were only concerned about the here and now. She literally said they didn't concern themselves with an afterlife.
Right.
But we've already seen that that's simply untrue. Isaiah 25 and 26, Daniel, the Gospels, the rabbinic tradition, everything I've read from thus far has all said that the Jews were concerned with the afterlife, resurrection followed by immortality and eternal life for some. So that's just false to begin with. But putting that aside, is it true that the language they used had no way of communicating eternity, or at the very least that they didn't use the language to communicate eternity? Right. Well, there is some dispute over just what olam means in the Hebrew Old Testament. It certainly doesn't always mean forever. And the same, by the way, is true of Greek words that are sometimes translated forever in the New Testament. So, for example, the Greek word aionios, translated eternal in Matthew 25:46, where Jesus says some will go to eternal life, others to eternal punishment. Sometimes that word doesn't seem to mean forever. For example, I think in the New Testament, the mountains are at one point called aionios, meaning very long time ago. They've been there beyond the horizon, just as Julie is saying. But I think the problem with what Julie is doing here is she's committing a fallacy that Don Carson has called the unwarranted restriction of a semantic field. Let me explain what I mean by that. In virtually any language and virtually any words in any language, they do not just have one meaning. They have a range of meanings that linguists call the semantic field or the semantic range. And this fallacy that Don Carson is talking about is the fallacy of saying that a word that has one meaning in all of its meanings always has that meaning. So I'll give you one example, and then I'll turn specifically to the issue of olam and aionios. It is very often said, Jesus says in John 17:3, this is eternal life, that they know you, God the Father, and Jesus Christ whom you have sent. And a lot of people read that and say, look, he's defining eternal life as meaning knowing God and Jesus, because he says that's what is eternal life. But there's some problems with this. Consider that at the end of the musical today, You're a Good Friend, Charlie Brown, I think is what it's called. Mm-hmm. At the end of that musical, the cast sings a song that repeatedly over and over again says, happiness is X. Happiness is Y. Happiness is a good book. Happiness is finding a pencil when you need one or whatever. They're not saying that those things are what define happiness. They're saying that those are things that result in or bring happiness. And in fact, Don Carson, in his very explanation of this fallacy, uses the word is, but in the Greek, as such an example, because it doesn't always mean identical to. It sometimes is the result of. In fact, in two other places in John, Jesus says that something is life, and what he's talking about are the words of the Father in one case, and the words that he himself is saying in another case. And he's not defining life as his words. He's saying, my words result in life. They bring life. So anyway, the point here is that what Julie is doing is she's rightly identifying that the Hebrew olam and the Greek aionios include meanings that do not mean forever. within their semantic range.
Right.
But the mistake that she's making is saying that that's therefore what those words always mean. But if you look at respected, scholarly, researched lexicons, very recent ones even, they list multiple definitions of both words, and some of which are everlasting. The Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament, for example, which is probably the premier lexicon of Old Testament Hebrew, lists under olam the definitions of long time or duration, but it also lists everlasting and eternity, and so does the lexicon known as Bauer Driver Briggs. And as for New Testament Greek, the lexicon known as Lo Nida, as well as the lexicon known as BDAG, Bauer Donker, Arndt and Gingrich, they both include the meanings of eternal or everlasting in the definitions of the New Testament word aionios. So what you have to do is look at how these words are used in any given context to determine whether they just mean for a time or whatever. And when you look at places like Daniel 12:2, for example, some will rise to olam life and others to shame and olam contempt. Similarly with aionios in Matthew 25:46, some will go into eternal life, others into eternal punishment. There is no Jesus and Daniel are not saying some will go into life for a time and then others into punishment for a time. Oh, but then they'll go to life too.
Right.
No, they're saying these are the two final destinations. It's the context that tells you that they're using the words olam and aionios to mean everlasting. So yeah, hopefully that helps a little bit.
No, definitely. I think it does a lot to kind of just center this whole debate on some of the words and some of the language and the semantic range that they're using. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the conversation that I had with Chris Date. If you're interested in checking out the whole conversation I had with Chris, you can go ahead and click here. As always, if you are dealing with deconstruction, I would invite you to subscribe. Thanks. We'll see you next time on Dealing with Deconstruction.